Summia, you're the Rhodes Scholar, so I'm going to ask you the hard question. And that is, so there is no government in exile. The elites, the political elites are failing you. I don't know exactly why. They fight with each other and they blame each other, but they don't do anything. And so, the Taliban doesn't have any political organization that is pushing back on them. And I wondered if you thought that Afghan journalism is going to have to play that role, because the elites have disappeared. And it's you guys who are, talking about what's happening on the ground, what's happening to women, what the Taliban does to women. I mean, the rape story is terrifying, but the fact that it's out is important. So I wondered if I don't mean for you to answer the question, what is wrong with the elites and what happened to them and why do they fall down and fail? More important is, we know that happened. So does that put more of a burden on Afghan journalism as the only force against the Taliban?
Yeah, I think so. I've actually thought a lot about this question. Yeah, so it's great that you asked that question. And have been discussing with several people who are not only journalists but activists, and also being part of the sort of the political elite group, right? I think you point out something very important, which I think there's a vacuum, right? In terms of what voices are being heard and who's opposing the Taliban. And I think when there's opposition towards the Taliban, groups that are opposing them have different, either they have different opinions about the Taliban, their governance, or certain groups that focus on human rights violation, certain groups who are focused on certain political agendas. So there are different groups working on different issues. And I think journalists play a very important role in ensuring whose voices are being heard and who's being given platform. But I don't think it's only journalists. I think it extends beyond to, international organizations, NGOs. I think even political elites in the United States, political elites everywhere in the world. Who are we giving the platform, and whose voices are we elevating when it comes to the campaigns that are created in terms of regarding Afghanistan, in terms of what issues are being highlighted about Afghanistan. And I think for Afghan journalists, I've seen, while working at my time with Intercept and at New America, the journalists that I worked with and the human rights activists I worked with from Afghanistan and researchers who I worked with, all were trying really hard to bring and create that alternative space for us to hear stories of people who are not necessarily heard over the 20 years. I think even when there was journalism over the 20 years in Afghanistan, I think there was emphasis in terms of what type of stories were being, showcased, because there was an intervention of the US in terms of the focus on the progress and maybe not so much focused on the failures. And now there's this reflection phase going on, and I think journalists are also thinking about that, but also different people in different spaces. But I think for us as journalists, it's very important that we push for bringing in the alternative voices. And I'm really glad hearing what Zahra John is doing and what Samiullah John is doing at their work with the outlets that they have. And I think they are trying to create those alternative spaces. And especially with Zan Times, I think they're really trying hard to bring voices of women who might have not been heard over the years, and for us to recognize that there is a need for us to look beyond what we've been looking for answers to, whether those are the political elites, Afghan political elites who are abroad now. I think it's important to not just focus on them and elevate their voices, but also look into people on the ground who are living on a daily basis, the realities of what the Taliban is doing, and really find those people and elevate their voices, because now they're the ones who are at the front lines fighting this battle. And our role as journalists is to elevate their voices and give them platform, not to dictate what should be said or done. And it's the same with international organizations. It is same with, I think, any political groups that are working on Afghanistan. It's very important we listen to those voices on the ground and listen to their stories. So that is something like I would emphasize on. Yeah.